Hello and welcome to the Asian American Forward podcast. It's just Don and I again this week, and we're in the same time zone again. I am visiting my parents in Tennessee, and he is in New York, busy on the campaign trail. But we wanted to take some time out this week to kind of reflect again on COVID. Just a few months ago, I was defending India's COVID response in our tournament that we did. I don't know even if it was months ago. It might have just been a couple weeks ago. Time flies. But I was defending India's COVID response in our COVID tournament a few episodes back. But now they're kind of on the global spotlight for failing to contain the virus. So I'm really excited to kind of unpack some of that with you, Don, and also use this as an opportunity to think about what COVID is going to mean for us going forward as things are kind of returning to America in the US. So that was a long intro. But Don, it's good to talk with you again this week.
Me too. Nice to talk to you. And also, it's very glad we're in the same time zone, so it's only adjust our each sleeping hours.
Yeah, a lot less confusing with the scheduling too. India passed its COVID case count of 20 million in mid-March. And I read an article from around that time, or even a little earlier, kind of predicting that COVID was going to surge big time in India. So far, it had been, lots of people had been commenting, as I had been commenting in our episode, that India had a pretty unusually low number of COVID cases for its relatively dense population. And so we're in March. Modi announces a 3-week strict lockdown for the whole country, as soon as the pandemic started, and they were aggressive early on. However, they've struggled with testing. So what can we learn from kind of this dramatic change in India from a country that was kind of, handling COVID relatively well to a place that's now where we're all looking to sort of how we were looking at Wuhan in, February, and Italy a little after that. What do you make of this dramatic shift?
Yeah, I personally, it's very suspicious at the very beginning. It's Indian control the COVID is very effective. At that time, I think it's statistically, and also it's a statistical system, the reporting system. And India is much far behind the advanced Western country. So because it's most population in India, it's very, very hard to collect data, and also it's report the situation there, the real situation there. That's the original suspicious, but also in terms of Indians' culture and living the sanitary environment. And I always have an impression that India is far worse than most of the developing countries. So it's if we couldn't have a good statistics, good reporting system, and also good testing system, the Indian number is sooner or later maybe research again. But I didn't expect it is coming to this scale. This scale is far, far beyond every people's expectation. It's pretty serious, and we're all worried about the spreading the second wave and going to spreading to the other countries. I think at this moment, everyone, and including the politician and the leaders around the country, should be pay a lot of attention to pay serious attention to Indian situation, and also try to support the Indian government to supply medical equipment, and also the other things we can support them. That's the situation, I think.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any concern that with the new variants that are kind of spreading through India, I mean, we don't know much about them yet in terms of whether they're more transmissible or deadlier than previous variants of the virus, but do you think there's concern that the high level of spread in India will lead to spikes across the world?
Very much, and the variants of the COVID is this time is we don't have a effective, or it's clearly path how they transmit and how they spreading, and also the capacity of the virus, how strong they are, and how they can have anti the medicine. So far we have so much we have done all the preventive and got a vaccine already, whether it's antivirus and have some resistance to that. That's the key. But overall, I'm pretty confident that in this country, United States, even coming here, and almost I think it's 1/3 of our country's population has been vaccinated already. So it's I personally think advise we pay attention in advance, and also it's find where it's coming from and try to return the spreading. I think this country pretty safe at this moment.
Yeah, I mean, I love that you brought up the point about vaccine, because I think India is kind of a really interesting entry point into talking about the global vaccine supply just in general. So it's kind of a two-part issue in India. One part of the issue being that there is an Indian company. I want to say it's the Serum Institute, that I may be wrong. But they were one of the largest vaccine manufacturers who's been shipping doses of the AstraZeneca virus, both to Indian citizens and to people across the world. On top of this, there have been issues at AstraZeneca plants in Europe and also the UK and Canada. That has seen delays in vaccine delivery, not only in India, but across the world. And so I'm wondering if you kind of could relate that to American vaccine and vaccination efforts. Like, how should we be coordinating globally about making sure not only that in our individual countries we're containing the virus and getting populations vaccinated, but how can we collaborate with other countries, or how do you see that happening?
Yeah, I think this kind of a pandemic and this time of COVID is really show the international, all the countries should be working together. And especially, the last week, Joe Biden has been pushed forward to have a patent, release a patent to all the manufacturers to get them to have a generic vaccine. And I personally think that's the first step to help other countries, especially poor country. They cannot afford the either Johnson Johnson or whatever the vaccine we have. So it's if we can develop a non-patent vaccine, and I think it's going to help to solve the human suffering and much quicker and effective. Whether it's a long-term, it's a patent system, is going to help other drug company, or it's a help the R&D for the new drugs. And that's another issue. I think it's a top one priority to save people's life. This is the number one priority, regardless the future, the law, or the innovation protection.
Mm-hmm. So to get a little bit more specific about it, there is in the US a fair amount of vaccine hesitancy. We're kind of getting through the original rush of lots of people going for the vaccine. In late February, early March, when I first started looking into getting my own shot in California, I was told that there were no appointments in my county and I couldn't get a hold of one. But I was hearing just last week that Marin County has a surplus. So that's another Bay Area county, north of San Francisco. They have a surplus of vaccines, and people either aren't coming in for their second shot, or we're running through the number of people who are interested in getting vaccinated. So is it time for the US government to start moving some of these surplus vaccine supplies abroad?
I personally think it is time. It's as long as we have a supply, we need to send the vaccine to the other country to help the other countries' people, especially to the Indian country, to the Indian people, and also the other. There's several countries now have a signs like Brazil and the several other countries that have some troubles. So it's time for us to help them. Help them is help us. That's my basic philosophy. Some people may not be happy, but I personally strongly believe this is a time. Is the American should lend a hand to help others.
And you've been vaccinated, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So my other question, I mean, this is kind of turning away from India a little bit, but like, I'm curious about how people in your circles are talking about vaccination. You know, I'm fairly young and most of my friends were excited to get the vaccine, but I've had quite a few, even, you know, I have a twin brother, so members of my own family who have been pretty suspicious, particularly of the mRNA technology that's used in both the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. So I'm curious about, like, in your personal life, is most everyone vaccinated, or are people still demonstrating some of that vaccine hesitancy?
It's a depend. So far, it's that I have a two friend circle. One is in the New York City. One is back to the Bay Areas. It's the Bay Areas. The people, most people they vaccinated already, but most Trump supporters or Republican and conservative, they don't believe the government and they insist the virus have some trouble or it's a long-term negative effect. They insist they don't want to do the vaccine. That's the very, very small part of my friend circle. But in New York City, people here is more progressive and they more believe vaccines are necessary. The people here is still keep a social distance, have the face mask every day. And whenever they go to public place, they always cover their mouth and nose. And also they try to get the vaccine as much as the quicker as they can. That's so far the two different friend circle. Here is they take a vaccine and COVID very, very serious.
And when you're talking to those people who are suspicious of the vaccine, do you try to convince them
it's
to
very
get
hard.
the shot?
It's very, very hard. It's I do try it, but even I just start talking, they immediately shut me up. See, this is a conspiracy. It's a government conspiracy, and not good for them, for their children. So they just try the different thinking and logic. But for the young people, even the parent, they refuse to have a vaccine. But most of the children and their children, like teenagers, 20 years to 30 years, they all go to the vaccine.
So how do you think the government can kind of tackle this issue of vaccine hesitancy? Or should we just let it be?
No, I personally think it's if one person didn't do the vaccine, that's going to cause some risk. So it's of course, this is a free country. People have a right to refuse to take a vaccine. The best approach for me is just emphasize or enforce public place. If you have a vaccine, you can go. If you don't have a vaccine, they don't allow you go. So it's indirectly, it's going to put a pressure for people refuse to vaccine. In that way, we can protect most people to provide free riders. They just don't take a vaccine, but they can still go anywhere. That's going to bring risk to other people. So it's my approach or thinking is just emphasize on most or all public place. If you want to go and you want to indoor activity, you have to show your vaccine pass card.
So you're in favor of vaccine passports?
Yes, very much.
Interesting. I don't think it'll catch on in the US, but we could debate the merits of doing it or not. And that could even be a whole episode of its own. So maybe we'll save it for later. But I want to kind of bring the conversation back to India, having reflected on the US a little bit. So one of the reasons that I have kind of read up about in recent weeks for the large outbreak in India is due to both politicians and citizens just growing a little bit more relaxed about the virus. As I was saying at the top of the show, there was an extremely strict lockdown in India. I don't believe you were able to leave your house at all. And they've even seen a decline in cases earlier in the year. But as kind of time has gone on, we've seen more and more large events happening in India that may have contributed to this surge. So as Americans also become more vaccinated and more confident about moving around, what do you think we can kind of learn from this message or this situation?
The situation from over restriction, or it's from martial law, military is the restriction and coming to too exciting and based on the political environment or it's a political season and go to very relaxed stage and just suddenly open. Let's give us lessons. So it's we need to closely monitoring the case numbers and every day and every area. So to make sure it's that we open the restaurant, public place gradually. It's to make sure it's the everything is under control, and that's the purpose. And we are in the campaign for the New York mayor and start to have in person more and more. And I see the trend that the people going to have a 10, 20, 50, 100, 500. That's going to be the number going to increase. And also state and also city, they have a different policy. And New York City say we're going to open on the July 1st, and the state say we're going to open immediately. Some controversial is a policy from political leadership that shows a different signal to the public. It's very, very, I don't feel very confident that if a government, if it don't have the policy strictly based on the analysis data, that's pretty random and random make a decision is going to cost social cost a lot.
So where's the balance between the strict restrictions, yeah. strict restrictions and allowing people to do things like, have weddings and graduation ceremonies again that are really just a part of life that we do want back?
Yeah. I emphasize there's several the stage, and also we need to monitoring in dynamic. So that means that every day, every area that we have a data collection to make sure we closely monitoring the progress, and also which direction is going to happen. And also it's indoor, outdoor, it should be separate policy. Outdoor is we can much looser, and indoor is we should more restrictive. And that's the direction we should going for.
Yeah. So I also want to talk a little bit. We've sort of talked about India's kind of harsh crackdown, but this kind of COVID spike in India is also revealing issues related to censorship and technology and how governments can and should interact with companies like Facebook, for example. So India has requested that a lot of the big tech and social media companies, Twitter, Facebook included among these, take down content that they claim contains misinformation about the pandemic. However, it could be just a pretense to remove criticism. There is some evidence of that. How do you think we can balance kind of this need to censor scientific information in a crisis situation like this? And, what is the role of companies versus government here?
Yeah, censorship is a pretty sensitive issue for everyone. But as for the pandemic, some is the news is going to cause people's fear and tension, anger, or it's whatever the sentiment they're going to bring in. And I think the government should have a little bit looser restriction to the medical or it's disease information related news. Some may be fake news, but the fake news is for the pandemic. Even I personally prefer is let them spreading a little bit even worse, or it's give people a little bit of warning or scare it away instead of take them down and restrict the news spreading around. I think it's this part is different than political hate speech or it's the violence in the tendency language. Those one is the more serious on criminal side, but as for the medical information, I think it's we can set a bar a little bit lower.
I mean, for example, Facebook blocked a resign Modi hashtag that was trending in India. Is that sort of behavior by an American company appropriate, or is that, are they acting on behalf of a foreign government? How do you make sense of something like that?
That's different. I just say that if information related to purely to medical information or it's a pandemic numbers or spreading the area, those kind of things, even a little bit untruthful or in the number or the whatever the information content, we give a little bit looser. As for the step down or it's the ask the Moody to resign, those kind of information, I think it's every public figure. They suppose, especially national, the head of the leader of a country should be have a much tolerance to the voice of whatever objection or is against him. That's the any leader, they should have this kind of a capacity to tolerate toward him, but for somehow toward to the local or it's a little bit and the regular normal people, these kind of things maybe we should have a different rule or it's criteria to evaluate, especially for the Facebook or Google. Those companies they base here, they are not very familiar with the Indian politics. Generally,
Right.
they shouldn't step in to interrupt those kind of a message.
Well, we could do a whole episode, honestly, about Facebook's Supreme Court that they recently launched. Do you know about this?
We know we're going to put this one on the next episode or several issues.
Yeah, we should put a pin in that because we haven't talked about it before. Yeah, because we could definitely talk about what kind of role, Facebook has played, for example, in Myanmar and whether it's appropriate for an American company to have that kind of influence in foreign politics. But that's completely a little bit beside the point today. So bringing it, back to COVID, back to India, obviously this is affecting Modi, perceptions of Modi's leadership pretty negatively. He already had somewhat of a mixed record, I think, as a leader. But I want to kind of get into the political nitty-gritty about how crisis politics have affected not only India, but countries across the world. What can this teach us about how politicians handle crises in general? You can think about how Trump handled the pandemic versus the Biden administration, or kind of Netanyahu has also gotten a lot of criticism in Israel. On the other hand, we've seen people like Angela Merkel, Jacinta Ardern in New Zealand, and the Prime Minister of Ireland, whose name I feel like I'm going to butcher, so I may not say it, have been kind of lauded for their approach. So kind of what lessons have you taken about political leadership from these types of crises?
Yeah, I think it's every single politician's the criteria to measure their leadership is how they dealing with a crisis and the emergency, always the sudden happen, the emergency, those kind of situation like a tornado, it's a flooding, it's an earthquake.
If you think about like the Bush administration and Katrina.
Katrina
and 9/11 too.
Yeah, that's every event is going to be the trigger of testing the politicians, their judgment and their reaction capacity and how they allocate the resources to response to the emergency. And I personally think it's every politician in their mind, there's always consistent to have the ruler in their heart to measure which one is a calculated risk, which way they can go to win more votes and win the people's trust, and also it's how effectively they can solve the problem. And I think it's at this moment, Modi has demonstrated he failed to respond to the Indian nationwide COVID second wave. So I don't know whether it's too late to adjust the policy, but there's always a time always have a window to and experience from other countries he can learn from, and also ask for help to support and help Indian people to get over this second wave crisis.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting to see, how leaders have either benefited or, the opposite of benefited, suffered losses as a result of the pandemic. I think you could definitely debate whether or not Joe Biden would have won without COVID, which is also, again, probably another topic for another episode. But this has also happened in other places. The Irish Prime Minister I was mentioning wasn't super popular prior to COVID and has become more humanized as a result of that. Also in South Korea, President Moon Jae-in was sort of, not doing so great. Economic growth is low. His diplomacy with North Korea had stalled. But now his party has won a general election, and it's clearly connected to how he handled the pandemic. So I'm wondering, as you also think about campaigning and are getting close to the sort of closer and closer to the election date with Andrew, he hasn't ever led, so he hasn't maybe necessarily had a crisis moment of the magnitude of 9/11 or the coronavirus. But what do you think about in terms of the campaign as those crisis moments, or where are those opportunities for him to really show his stuff as a politician?
Yeah, I think it is you raise a very interesting point of the politician handle the emergency, whether they take advantage to popular their name, or it's make a more influence, draw the attention of media, and also it's whether they are suffering from their way to dealing with either pandemic or any other crisis. In my mind, is Andrew is pretty good on this part. I just make an example. Yesterday, there's a shooting happened in the Times Square, and there's a random shooting, and 3 or 4 people has been shot and got hurt. No other candidate and immediately just standing up and except Andrew, and coming out this morning at 10 o'clock in the Times Square at the same shooting place, immediately call is a press conference and lay out entire the police reform, and also it's a law enforcement reform plan. That's the very, very in timing. And also he delivered the message very clearly, say defund the police is not right choice. It's a police need a reform, but also it's a New York people need a police to secure their life, and also it's very critical for the New York to recover the economy. That's against the very liberal or progressive the voice the defund police, and whether it's going to cost our campaign or not, we don't know. But we truly believe and police is needed, and also it's police so far the mentality of every police officer in New York, they just try to idle, hide, and do nothing, and that kind of a mentality should change immediately to protect New York people.
Yeah, so I hope certainly that the crises to come turn out well for you. I want to just add one last little question, which is that you're the person who chose this topic. So I wanted to hear from you just why you thought this was important for us to talk about now, or if you have any personal reflections on kind of watching these events in India, kind of having been through our own crisis in the United States. I think it feels really different than it did at the beginning of the pandemic, watching Wuhan and watching Italy really heat up, knowing that it was coming our way. And now that we're kind of on the tail end, watching it happen to someone else. What's the kind of deeper meaning of reflecting on it now to you?
I personally feel it's a pandemic start from China and spreading to the world, and each country has been dealing with pandemic separately. And also the Indian, the second surge of COVID is really demonstrate if each country dealing with COVID or it's the entire human beings crisis or pandemic is not good way. It's need to coordinate worldwide with every country get involved. And if one part is suffering, every part of a human being should be helped. And then it's that way we can overcome the crisis. That's the why I think it's the Indian second surge of this COVID is going to be top subject. We should talk with the people and make people realize, or entire people in the world, and on this global, it's just the global village, the concept that really reflect our society, especially the civilization. We need to emphasize this part. And also I think it's a patent and the release at this moment is very critical. No matter it's how our patent system to set up to protect innovation, but during the crisis, sometimes we need to sacrifice or some part of the market-driven principle and give some government more way to dealing with the people who cannot use money to buy the health, to buy the life. It's all government responsibility to help people, everyone.
I love it. You're always the optimist, giving me good places to end. So I think that is a great place to wrap it up, that we can think of ourselves as a global village. And that kind of gives us a lens to think about all of these different issues. So I will thank you again, Don, for joining me this week. Nice to be in the same time zone again with you.
Thank you, Katie.
And we'll wrap it up there. My name is Katie Simpson. Our podcast is sponsored by Asian American Forward. You can visit our website at www.asianamericanforward.com. If you enjoyed the show this week or have a topic you'd like to hear us discuss on a future episode, send us your comments at info@asianamericanforward.com. We'd love to hear from you. You can also find us on Facebook and hear more conversations between Don and I at our YouTube channel. If you're a fan of the show, leave us a review in the Apple Podcast Store or tell someone about us. It really helps people find the show. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next week.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you, everyone.